Hello, I hope you're well and welcome back to my channel, Hannah Tay. I'm going to do my review of Normal Women. I actually mentioned this in a reading vlog, so I'm going to do a spoiler-free review and then I'll tell you when the spoilers begin and we can really get into it because there's so many topics in this book to discuss. So this was originally published in 2023 and this is about a woman called Dani who she's a stay-at-home mum. She had a job before that but she never really loved her job, and her husband Clark is the breadwinner and she calls herself his little dependent, and she also refers to herself as his slave, and she feels a bit trapped staying at home with her daughter Lottie, who she loves very much, but she feels kind of worthless within society because she doesn't make money. She then moves back to her hometown with Clark and he's going to gentrify the whole neighbourhood. And then there's this place called the Temple, which from the outside looks like a yoga studio, but it's actually a brothel. So she goes there and becomes quite fascinated with these women who are obviously prostitutes. And Dani has a very normal life. That's why it's called Normal Women. So she has the normal women in her life who are other mums who live this kind of nice middle class lifestyle, and then she has these women who she watches who are prostitutes in this brothel, and she sees the prostitutes in the brothel as being much more free than the normal women who she hangs around with. So then there's a woman called Renata. She owns the temple, the yoga studio / brothel, and she befriends Dani and starts telling Dani about what actually goes on in there, and she describes it as healing. They heal the men that come in. Someone then goes missing and then Dani has to turn detective, and that's the book. And the book is really about modern day society right now and the trappings that the author obviously feels that women are trapped into. Do women choose to be mothers, or is it society kind of coercing them into being mothers? That's kind of the plot of the whole thing. That was not as it was described on the back. The back, it basically says, new mother Dani. She feels like she doesn't really relate to these normal mothers, these other mums. And then she steps into another role entirely, detective, when someone goes missing. The missing part doesn't happen till right at the end. So probably less than 50 pages from the end, someone goes missing. So 250 pages of this is just her talking about being trapped, and she doesn't do anything inside the temple. She's just observing these women, but she does not know them, the prostitutes, and she's just observing them from afar and drawing her own conclusions to what their lifestyles must be like. And then it's her conversations with her kind of normal women, the other mothers, and then Renata, who owns a brothel, and her relationship with her and her husband. But 250 pages of like the same point. She feels trapped. She feels women are trapped into motherhood. She has completely given up all her freedoms to motherhood. 250 pages of that. I was thinking like Agatha Christie. I was thinking like murder mystery. There was a mention of a brothel on the back, but it wasn't really mentioned that much that I thought it was going to dominate the whole story. The detective bit, this woman who's a normal mum turning detective to find a missing person, not really. Even when it gets to that bit, and say that's like the last 50, because it's over 300 pages, this book, so it's the last 50 pages. The 250 pages were dominated talking about her life. Then you got 50 pages of this little her turning into a detective. Not really. She does a little bit of phoning around. So that's the spoiler-free portion. I didn't enjoy the book. I didn't think it was as advertised, and then now I'm going to go into the spoilers as to why, certain points as to why I didn't enjoy the book. I didn't really agree with the book and the message and everything to do with it. So that's the spoiler-free bit of it. So now onto the spoilers. So when Dani is observing the brothel and the prostitutes, she's really romanticising their lives. She's like, they're so free. They don't have to depend on a man for money or be back in time for a child. And she's really making these like grand leaps that these women are living these great lifestyles when they're probably living a harrowing, awful lifestyle. And she points that out in the book. She says, you know, you look at documentaries and you think these women would be oppressed. These are street prostitutes she's talking about who get into men's cars. You think that they're putting their lives in danger and in peril. Yeah. And she's like, no, I see that they're free. I see that they're drinking and laughing and the camaraderie between them all. That camaraderie in their misery, in their joint misery with each other. who are we to judge? Let's not judge anyone. And it's not judging, it's just the reality of the situation. As most women wouldn't choose that as something to do. They would be in quite a desperate, desolate situation to end up that way. So her kind of romanticising it, I found it very bizarre, very spoilt bratish. And then she kept saying that her friends were racist. So the woman in it, Danny, the main character, was saying that her friends were like these racists and they weren't woke like she is. And so she is woke. She understands that these prostitutes probably have great lives and no one understands. But then why would you hang out with them? It just didn't make sense. That why would she remain the friendship if she thought they were like bad people? Also, the whole idea of the temple is the idea that men live longer if they're married and women live less time if they're married. So she hears this statistic, and then Renata, who owns the brothel, is just reinforcing this in her. And so I don't know if this is the author's like opinions. It felt like this book was trying to like revolutionize you or something, or like really get this message across to you that the reason men live longer if they're married is because their wives will kind of manage their lives, manage their diet, manage their exercise, and decrease their stress levels by looking after the house, whereas men who are by themselves maybe won't eat very well, like almost like their children is kind of what she was saying about them, whereas women who are married give all their resource to their children, to their husband, and so they have nothing left for themselves, so they're depleted, so that's why they live less time. So that's really the basis of this story, to be honest with you, is that men can go into the temple and it's a brothel, so you can go in and have your sexual needs met, but also there might be a nutritionist. It's kind of a spa, and then they do yoga classes, so it's your exercise, and there might be a therapist. And the idea that that is something we should be working towards in the society is monetizing prostitution because it's good for men, and what's good for men is good for wider society. The idea being men rule the world. If we can fix men and fix their lives, like nutrition, exercise, sex, all the things that a human needs to be happy, then the world can be fixed. So if we had, it was really about like legalizing prostitution. If we had legal brothels everywhere that like married men could go into without stigma and have their sexual needs met and other needs met, then the world would be a better place because they would be calmer people. And I just felt like it was just saying like men are children basically, and that women should take charge, but then not take charge. They should commodify their bodies, because it kept talking about that, about like women have this resource, this built-in resource, which is our bodies, and that we should use that. This book. I also, on another note, don't really think it's like all women's responsibility to fix men, because men are their own individual people, as women are. So I don't think it's men's responsibility to fix women, but I don't think it's women's responsibility to fix men or anything like that. So the idea that a woman has to like take charge of a man. So there is two good examples of this, which is clever the way she does it, is that she's talking about the women in the brothel are changing these men, softening them. So they might come in quite hardened men, and then they get their needs met in the temple in various different ways, and then they are softened and they are better men for it. And then in the normal woman group, she has a friend who is a mum and who is tricking her husband to be on a diet. So her husband is overweight, and she has told the other mothers that she is taking down his calorie intake without him realising it, and upping his exercise, but he doesn't know. She hasn't said, you've got to go on a diet and lose weight. So she's doing it in a really subtle way, and then putting it on this kind of blog to document it for other women to take tips from. So you have two women. You have a woman who runs a brothel, who's saying, I'm actually helping men. And then you have a woman who is a wife saying, I'm actually helping my husband. But in both instances, the men don't really know. It's not a conscious thing that they're deciding to do. One of them's just married, one of them's just visiting a brothel, but the women believe that they are helping these men on a much deeper level. So I did like the juxtaposition between those two examples. I did think that was interesting. So it really is 250 pages of I'm unhappy in my life, and then this fantasy of her becoming a prostitute and healing men, because they call themselves healers. So does she have it within her to heal all these men and to heal the world? And that maybe that's what we need within our societies. And then there was this little detective thing at the end where there was a few phone calls made. And then right at the end, I hated the end. It was one of those, and everyone's connected and everything's fine and don't worry about it. She might as well have said, and the whole book was a dream and she woke up, because it was that kind of end. Like, it was tied up way too neatly at the end. And then just as she was revealing, something was being revealed to her, someone happens to walk in the room at the right time and go, here I am. Like, oh God, no. And I didn't think it was going to end like that, because a lot of it was dialogue. I'll say that first. Like, a majority of the book is dialogue. So it's people telling you what they think about things. So you never actually go into the temple and see a prostitute with a client ever. So there's no real world things going on within it in that sense at all. So you're not seeing any of the healing that they're saying taking place at all. You don't really hear from any of the prostitutes how it makes them feel to do that kind of work. So it was just a really unrealistic take on prostitution, in my opinion. I think it's safe to say this book wasn't for me. So I'm going to stop talking about it now. I probably won't read anything else from this author. I think probably, like, in every way, we're probably different women, different people. And yeah, I just found it all a bit nothingy, a bit like, oh, let's talk about these different subjects, but let's not really go in depth. Let's not talk about the reality of the subject, because we don't want to offend anyone. So let's just say everything's fine, everything's great, everything should be made legal, but not actually get into the weeds on the topics. That's kind of what I thought about it, to be perfectly honest. So I'm going to end this video here. Tell me what you think of this book, or have you read other books like that where you're just like, I would rather you got into the detail, got into the weeds, maybe offend me as the reader if you want to play like devil's advocate or whatever with something, as opposed to like really trying to play it a bit too safe for me personally. Anyway, I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to stop talking about this book and probably not read anything again from this author. So if you enjoyed this video, let me know down below in the comments. I make 3 videos a week, Monday, Wednesday and Friday. So please subscribe for that. And I will see you again soon for another video.